Viewers, welcome to the Personal Injury Law Show. This show talks about everything current in the law of personal injuries and obviously of importance to you, the viewer. My name's Tony Carbone. I'm a personal injury lawyer of 30 years experience. With me tonight I've got Don Maffia, a partner in the law firm in motor accidents. Good evening, Don.
Good evening, Tony. Good evening, viewers.
And Vivian Ryan, a director at Gravia Media. Good evening, Vivian.
Hi, Tony. Hi, Don. Good evening, viewers.
Viewers, tonight we're going to have Dr Nathan Serry, an eminent psychiatrist, talking about the changes to the transport accident laws in relation to psych injuries. So please stay tuned for Dr Serry.
Yeah, Tony, you know it's been nearly 18 months since the introduction of the new psych test under the Transport Accident Act.
That long?
It's been 18 months.
Well, that's good because when the doctor comes in, he'll be able to tell us a bit about his experiences and how these claims have been progressing.
Yes.
But obviously before that, we're going to talk about what's in the media, aren't we, Viv?
What's in the news, Tony?
And welcome back, Viv. You haven't
Thank
been
you.
on for a while.
It's been a while. Did you miss me?
I did miss you. You had a bit of colour and spunk to the show.
Thanks.
Now, in the media, we've had this dentist who's popped up from nowhere, but he's been practising for nearly 10 years.
I don't think, can you title him a dentist? I don't even think he's a dentist.
He's a dentist overseas
From Turkey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, why is it taking so long, Viv, for the authorities to do something? It's been 10 years.
I don't know, and this is really interesting because then we look at all of the practitioners in the marketplace and you question the validity of their credentials. I mean, this dentist has qualifications from Turkey, but he's been operating out of the northern suburbs in Victoria for over 13 years, has seen, I think, in excess of hundreds of patients. Yeah. But there's been a cry to ask people to come forward who may have been treated by this fake dentist. Unfortunately, you know, the public haven't been aware, but they may have also sustained some sort of medical issues. There is a very low level chance that they may have got hepatitis B,
hepatitis C,
just through to due to ineffective practices. So there's a real outcry for anyone who has seen him.
See, the problem is I don't even think the Department of Health and Human Services have any idea how many patients he's seen,
well, Don,
for how long, and what he's done to them. So
what's really tricky about this case is that he doesn't follow any hygienic practices.
He didn't even have any records.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
I've got no idea.
So I guess the moral of the story is always check your dentist and your doctor's credentials, but at the same time, these people coming forward, what right to compensation might they have, guys?
Well, the problem is he probably won't be insured, will he, Don?
Oh, I wouldn't think the insurance would cover him. He's professing to be a medical practitioner or dentist when he's not qualified.
So your only recourse is to sue him personally, Viv, unless you can sue the authorities for failing to keep a tab on people like this guy.
Well, he's been on for over 10 years with Department of Human Services having absolutely no idea, or health services.
They can't hide behind that, surely.
No.
Yeah.
Could there be a psych attachment to this? Because, I mean, I know if I'd seen someone who was, misrepresenting themselves, I would be mortified and somewhat, I don't know, it could affect my psyche.
There's cases of poor workmanship too, Viv. People have had to go and get other dentists to fix up the work that he's done. So there's those issues as well. Look, we might have to come back to this because I reckon it's going to evolve in the next couple of months, don't you think?
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. We'll come back, viewers. What's this about washing machines, faulty washing machines by Samsung, and there's already been a house fire? Don.
So Samsung has sold 144 washing machines.
144,000.
144,000, washing machines, which were faulty, which can cause fires, and obviously house fires consequently. And they've recalled it, but only 61,000 machines have been recalled.
That's bizarre, isn't it?
There's still a lot out there which could be devastating if it causes a fire and burns down a house and causes injury. So scary.
They're talking about class actions.
A class action,
So
that's
what
correct.
needs to happen in order for that class action to move forward, guys?
Well, you'd have to work out what this problem with the washing machines is. And if it's commonplace between all these units, then you just get a group of people together and you commence your proceeding.
And so would there be a threshold for compensation that they could claim, or what sort of money would they be looking at?
No, because it's mainly product liability. I'd imagine it would be the cost of replacement of the washing machine, and also in the instance where the family's home burnt down, you'd be suing for the loss of a house.
They're talking about obviously the property damage as compared to any injuries.
Yeah, although, if there's more fires, you could imagine, it could be pretty...
Yeah,
I've got a Samsung top-loader machine. They came out within 6 months after I bought it to fix it up. So it hasn't been in this recent recalls, but seems to be working fine.
Well, viewers, get it checked out because you just don't know. Have we gone too far? Insurance costs to take the play out of a playground, Viv. kids in the playgrounds getting injured, and there's a lot more claims these days against schools, kindergartens, and all sorts of places.
It's kind of disappointing at the same time because there's been a real shift for schools to actually remove a lot of the play equipment. Now, kids doing free play is really, really important for their growth, but essentially they're on the back foot trying to make sure that there's no insurance issues when people are injured or when children are injured. But the really interesting thing is that parents aren't aware that their child is not covered medically if they sustain an injury in the playground. So basically, well, yeah, which is interesting. And so, you know, the schools now, it's mostly the public schools that are now pushing for parents to take out additional cover to ensure that their children or child are covered if in the event of an incident. So I find that extraordinary.
It is. Don, I can remember 2 examples of serious injuries I sustained in the playground. I cracked my head twice. Actually playing chasey, I ran into a tree. It's still there. Another time I fell off the fence, landed on my head again.
So that's been the problem all these years. I do wonder what's been this issue all along. That tree.
Yeah, schools should be looking at taking accident insurance. Should be somewhat a compulsory insurance. I mean, we go to work, we're covered by a work cover insurance.
Exactly.
We're injured on the road, we're covered by the Transport Accident Commission.
Yes.
These kids spend 13 years of their lives at school and there's no insurance coverage that should be taken out. So I just think it's a cop-out from the schools. It's just trying to shift it onto the parents and take away these things that the kids need to develop and grow, but just take out some insurance.
So is it additional, like what sort of insurance would they be looking at? So obviously their house and contents or home and contents insurance wouldn't cover the children.
No, it has to be some sort of insurance.
It'll be
cover
some
playground accidents,
injuries. It'll be like personal insurance.
Oh, I love a little bit of additional insurance costs.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
We'll come back to that. Carl Williams' death sparked the claims by his ex-wife and also father and daughter, and now they're trying to legislate to do away with their rights to sue. What's your view, Viv?
I find this really interesting because essentially the state of play is that Roberta Williams, Carl Williams' former wife, has grounds to sue. So too does his father. So they are looking at potentially a payout of around $361,000
Realistically,
under the
about
Wrongs Act.
$150,000, I would have thought.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. Give or take.
Yeah, under the Wrongs Act. So I question any family member or any prisoner being eligible for compensation when their acts have actually been completely...
Creating a lot of misery on other people.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what I wanted to ask you, there was a question around non-profit motivated offences versus profit motivated offences. Now, what does this category fit in under?
Well, in this case, it'll be drugs.
Yeah.
So profit category. But look, I'm somewhat struggling with the concept. Look, there's also two sides of the argument.
I don't like them doing it retrospectively. So I think they should do it prospectively.
We're taught that justice is blind.
Yeah.
So the fact that they've had this drug conviction, on one hand, you say, well, they should have access. Look, Carl Williams' death obviously arose when he was under the care of the Department of Correction.
Yeah.
So somewhat a breach of their duty, you would think. So in that regard, you'll say, well, why aren't they entitled where his death resulted from a negligent act? So look, there's going to be two sides of the argument. I'm I'm on both sides.
What I'm asking though is, what are they suing for? Obviously negligence.
They're suing for their pain and suffering.
Yeah. Psychological injury. Yeah. And then look, they must, under the Wrongs Act, you've got to have a significant injury, which is a 10% impairment under the AMA
you'd think you'd
guides.
Have that. Yeah.
So that they are suffering. I mean, if they've reached that threshold, you think they are having some ongoing issues. So there's going to be two sides. And I'm sort of, it's hard to make.
Viewers, stay tuned. After the break, we'll be talking to Dr Nathan Seri in relation to psychiatric injuries and the changes that have occurred under the Transport Accident Act. Viewers, welcome back to the show. Tonight we're very fortunate to have Dr Nathan Seri, a consultant psychiatrist over 27 years. Good evening, Doc. How are you?
Good to see you.
Doc, in your day-to-day practice, in short, what do you do?
Well, I've got a mixed practice. I've got my own private practice where I see clinical cases which can range from people with depression, with anxiety, with psychotic disorders, a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. I see all sorts of different cases. But a significant part of my practice is medico-legal work, where I see people who have TAC claims, claims with work cover, other sort of personal injury claims, Wrongs Act, a mix of medico-legal work.
So, Doctor, so you're engaged by lawyers to do that medico-legal work, so it's an independent examination of the injuries?
I work on both sides, so I'm engaged by lawyers, by plaintiff law firms. I'm also engaged by the various insurers and by the TAC. So I think it's very important for somebody who's doing this sort of work to be seen as being completely independent.
And you're also on medical panels, Doc,
Yep.
which is pretty important too.
Yeah, and medical panels is the government-appointed body which resolves various disputes.
Don, tonight we've brought on Dr Seri to talk about the effect of the changes to the definition of psychiatric injuries under the Transport Accident Act, which we think is pretty horrendous.
It is. It is. So back in October of 2013 now, Tony, so
Yes.
again, coming up to the 18
It was
month
a
mark.
former Liberal government that changed
The former
the
Liberal government
legislation.
made some changes to the Transport Accident Act, which governs a person's entitlement to compensation arising from a transport accident. And they introduced a new test which, to allow a person to recover damages, they must show that they've got a serious injury. And the test that they've introduced, particularly just in relation to psychiatric injuries, in my view, it's so difficult that I can't see how anyone can
No, I agree
get
with
past
that.
with it. Yeah, so.
Well, I want to go through the test with the doctor. Doc, the first part of the test is you've got to have a recognised mental illness or disorder other than abnormal illness behaviour as a result of a transport accident. Are we splitting hairs? Are we playing with words? Or
No, I think that's fairly reasonable. I think if you're going to be compensated for the effects of an accident, that there should be a clear, recognised and diagnosable psychiatric condition.
has that ever been a problem? in your eyes?
No, I don't think so.
But Doctor, you got the abnormal illness behaviour. So is that someone consciously putting it on or feigning? Or how do you... Is that a clinical term? Can someone have an abnormal illness behaviour but be psychiatric?
It's not a psychiatric diagnosis per se. It's a descriptive term that's used when the way that somebody presents after a particular accident or injury is out of proportion to what would ordinarily be expected. So it's a term that's used, unfortunately, somewhat pejoratively. And so where there is a sense of embellishment, where there's a complaint of too much pain for the injury that underlies, that's along the lines of abnormal illness behaviour.
Don, number 2, displays symptoms and consequent disability that have not responded or have substantially failed to respond to known effective clinical treatments. Well, I mean...
I'm confused, but...
What does that mean, Doc?
Well, I think the intent there is that somebody who comes along with a clinical condition goes along and has appropriate treatment, and the expectation is that they will improve or recover with that appropriate treatment. And if they don't, that's when I think that's what this is referring to.
My issue with that is that some psychological conditions, what I've seen doing plaintiff work, some people who are suffering a psychological condition actually struggle to get that treatment and to get out and to see a doctor and to see a psychologist, to access that. So, Doc, does that sort of prohibit those type of people? Because it isn't within the nature of a psychiatric injury that it is difficult to sometimes get out there and seek the treatment.
This is an incredibly complex area because we know that access to mental health services can be really quite difficult for a lot of people. Take, for example, somebody who lives in a rural area where there's very limited access to psychiatrists, for example, where because psychiatrists do tend to be clustered around the urban areas and in particular suburbs, it can be difficult to get to psychiatrists. And also there can be a lot of resistance. Just because somebody has got a mental illness doesn't mean that they're automatically going to go and seek treatment. People still carry with them a sense of resistance. A lot of people have that stigma about mental illness and about treatment with psychiatrists. You know, I do a lot of medico-legal work, and the number of people who come in and see me, I'm the first psychiatrist that they've ever seen, and they are overwhelmed by fear about the very process, about the prospect of sitting there and seeing a psychiatrist. So just because someone is struggling with a mental illness doesn't automatically mean that they're going to participate in treatment.
Doc, isn't there a misconception that people think that when they come to a psychiatrist that they're actually crazy? Whereas more often than not, if you ever get anyone that is at that point where, for want of a better word, crazy, you can hardly treat them, can you? You can hardly fix or assist someone in those circumstances. So you're really trying to get people that are headed down the path of serious psychiatric problems, but you want to get them before they get to the point where it's beyond help.
Well, with respect, crazy is not a word.
No, I know it's not a word.
we
I'm saying,
use.
we're talking to the lay people now. That's why I'm using that word.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you can treat very, very unwell people.
Yes.
But the minority of people who go and see psychiatrists are crazy, in inverted commas. They're normal people just like you and me who life has dealt a tough set of cards to, and we've got to try and help them build up their resilience and robustness to deal with whatever life presents them with.
Doc, do you think the incidence of psychological/psychiatric symptoms in the community these days has grown in the last, say, 5 to 10 years?
I think there's greater awareness, so there's greater presentation, so people aren't hiding away in their own solitude with their emotional distress. So I think that we're seeing more of it. But I also think that we're living in a society which is in many respects more complex, and but I think people are more lonely and isolated, and I think that we've lost a lot of the external supports that used to be there and that protected people. So extended family, those sorts of things.
Okay. Viewers, we've got to go to our sponsors break. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll take up the discussion with Dr Seri and Don Maffia. Viewers, welcome back to the show. Before the break, we're talking to Dr Nathan Seri and also Don Maffia about psychiatric injuries and in particular in the context of transport accidents. Doc, I'll go to the third part of his test. The person is going to be severely impaired in function with symptoms causing clinically significant distress and severe impairment in relationships, social and vocational functioning. Don, in layman's terms, what's it mean? And then I'm going to go to the doctor to see his spin on
the
it.
literal meaning has got to affect your relationship that you have with people, others, and social. So social outings.
Isn't it the same thing?
Relationship and social? No, they've separated.
No? Okay.
And
So-
vocational, work functioning. So it's quite literal. So it means and means good and means you've got to show those.
So it's got to satisfy
effects.
all three.
Well, yeah.
Because it says it's inclusive, not exclusive.
Well, just interpretation of it.
Yep,
That's right.
Yep. Doc, I've spoken to the Transport Accident Commission about this, and they say they've got a policy that if any one particular individual is not working because they're home duties or they're retired, they're going to employ, in the definition, they're going to take out the business about vocational functioning. But I've spoken also to one of the judges, and he said that if you look at it strictly, then you don't qualify if you don't satisfy the third part. So it's a pretty tough test, isn't it?
It is a tough test, but it also, I think, knocks out those people who, despite overwhelming psychological or emotional difficulties, they may be the sole breadwinner in their family, and they may force themselves to go and work. And we know that people do tend to push themselves beyond the limits. Now, that can be really quite unfair to people who may still be working, but who may be functioning at a significantly lower level than they were functioning before the accident. So the problem is just how high the bar is set. I know that there's perhaps some wiggle room where this is open to interpretation, but I'm concerned about the complexity of this and how essentially how high the bar is set, as you say, Don, with the and.
And this test obviously would discriminate children, stay-at-home mums,
of course.
retirees. But it's obviously a test that has been introduced to restrict the psychiatric injuries. So a view has been taken about psychiatric injuries. Question to you, Doctor, is with social media, Facebook, TV and all that, is there an increase in the diagnosis of what we normally see from transport accidents, post-traumatic stress disorder? I mean, is that something it's a condition that is just going to get worse and worse because of the access to social media and the like?
It's hard to say definitively, but anecdotally, we do see a lot of PTSD. It might not be full-blown PTSD, but people with PTSD-type symptoms, we are seeing quite a lot of that. And that's always the case when there's increased awareness, whatever is driving the increase in awareness. But it's when people are exposed to a very severe, for example, life-threatening trauma, severe injury, something that's horrific, the ordinary human reaction is to be traumatised. And so we do see quite a lot of that.
And Doc, the test says that you've got to have a severe long-term mental or severe long-term behavioural disturbance, and you need continuous treatment over 3 years. What's your interpretation of continuous treatment?
My interpretation of continuous treatment is as good as yours. I'm not sure what that actually means. In the legislation, they say by, I think it's a recognised or registered mental health professional. There is no such thing. That is not a definition which is easily...
Would it encompass a GP?
No.
Well, I don't think it does encompass a GP. And interestingly, the vast majority of mental health treatment provided in the community is in fact provided by GPs. GPs are the first line where most people go to. They're the ones who people go to. They see more mental health stuff than psychologists and certainly psychiatrists because there are so many more GPs, and GPs are often the first port of entry for people with mental health issues. They may then refer patients on to a psychiatrist or a psychologist via a mental health plan, but GPs are essential to the management of the full range of mental health conditions.
If someone's continually seeing you, for example, would seeing you every 3 months be continuous? You'd think so, wouldn't you?
I think it's very much open to interpretation.
Okay.
But the thing that we've, particularly in doing the plaintiff work, I find that TAC paying for medical expenses, particularly with psychological, psychiatric, they don't provide ongoing endless treatment. If there's no clinical benefits in their view, they will stop that payment to the psychologist. So you'll have a client, Tony, who may not have all that continuous treatment because TSF stopped funding that treatment after 12 months.
Don, nervous shock is complicated by these changes too because even though you can get it as a medical expense, treatment, the real problem is when you're trying to access the common law benefits. You've got to
satisfy that
preconditions.
Three-step test. So it's made it difficult. I mean, nervous shock, and again, what I say from my end, being a lawyer, is that there is an increase in the amount of people who are suffering from the psychiatric condition known as nervous shock. So, Doc, in your practice, are you seeing more and more of this nervous shock sort of scenario? I mean,
no, and I don't think that the numbers have changed yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens another 18 months, 2 years down the track. There may well be a reduction in the so-called nervous shock claims because of the way that the legislation has been worded, but I can't say as yet.
Doc, you might be pleased to know that when the Labor government was, when they were trying to get elected in, one of the promises they made is that they were going to repeal the legislation and bring us back to the way it was prior to the amendments, Don. Yeah. So there's current negotiations going on at the moment to actually try and achieve that result. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, Doc?
It doesn't make any difference to me, no. but I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of the legislation. I think people want certainty. Yes. People want to know, everybody, patients, the law, the legal world, the medical world, we want to know what is going on, and we want to know that that's going to continue to be the case down the track.
Well, it's getting towards the end of the show, Don. Doc, thanks for coming on board. We'll get you back here in the future. We'll see if those changes go through, and if they don't, we'll see how the law's evolving. Viewers, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for future episodes. Go to our past episodes, go to our website, Twitter, Facebook, and all the other social media that we've got. And always remember to stay safe.